Now to proposals that could lead to a major shake-up in English football, including a levy on transfer fees, which could go to supporting clubs further down the football pyramid.
The fan-led review, headed by former Sports Minister Tracy Crouch, has come up with 47 recommendations to ensure that the sport remains competitive and sustainable. The biggest change would see Premier League clubs paying a stamp duty-style solidarity payment to lower league clubs, a 10% levy on transfer fees, which would raise £160 million a year. The other key change would see an independent regulator for football, which would oversee club finances and decide whether owners and directors were fit to hold their role. There would also be limits on the amount of money that owners can put into a club to stop competitions getting distorted, while fans could also be given a golden share, which could veto certain key decisions from changing the club name, for example, or selling the ground.
Other recommendations, including an overhaul of the parachute payment system to benefit more clubs. Also, equality and diversity plans made mandatory for all clubs, a comprehensive review into the women's game. And there could also be trials to allow the consumption of alcohol while watching a match. Well, I am delighted to say that Tracy Crouch joins us now. And Tracy, you suggested football has been lurching from crisis to crisis, and that's why it needs an independent regulator. Tell us your thinking here.
Well, I think we've seen football over the past decade or so go from disaster to disaster, and for many football fans that's actually meant the complete demise of their own local club, and it's decimated the communities that those clubs have operated in. So this was very much a review with that in the back of our mind. It was a review that looked at the long-term financial sustainability of football, and therefore the outcomes, which are led by the fans through the evidence that they gave us, will, I think, put football on a really secure and sound regulatory and financial footing for the future.
And Tracy, in terms of the independent regulator, just give us a little bit more info here on how this would work. Who would appoint them? What powers would they have?
The independent regulator would be completely separate to the football authorities that run the game at the moment. It would be appointed by a panel of people, not by government, really important to stress that. And it would operate a licensing system to football clubs throughout the pyramid. This means that all the vested interests that currently exist in football that really create conflict sometimes in the decisions that the football authorities take will be completely removed. And therefore I think it will give more confidence in football clubs, and it'll give confidence for owners to come in and invest in those football clubs. I think it'll give confidence to the wealthiest parts of the pyramid, i.e. the Premier League, to be able to redistribute finances further down the football pyramid. And I think, all in all, taken as a holistic package of reform, this really does shift quite fundamentally English football for the future.
With all of that in mind, Tracy, would, for example, the Newcastle takeover been allowed? I think that's it's a lot to take in, isn't it? But in its most simplest form, fans have been talking about that alone.
It's a really good question, and you won't be surprised to learn I've been asked it a number of occasions since the publication of the review. But the truth is, it's really difficult for me to answer that question because I don't know the details of the takeover bid. What I would say is that I think with the new integrity test that includes good character and the relationship of owners in it, that it certainly would have stress tested that bid more than perhaps it was, and it would have been more transparent in the process. And that was something that many people, including the fans, were extremely concerned about when this bid was first submitted.
Let's have a look at some of the other proposals in this, Tracy. And one of the most eye-catching ones is this transfer levy. So it's being applied on Premier League clubs when they make signings from other Premier League clubs and other top division clubs around Europe, and that would filter money down the pyramid. Genuinely, how much of a difference do you feel that can make?
I think it could be transformational, especially in terms of grassroots football. I think the first thing to say is the Premier League itself already contributes a significant sum of money to parts of the pyramid through its solidarity payments. This is about Premier League clubs also making a contribution, and there is a distinction between them. I think people's eyebrows were slightly raised that the transfer window immediately post-COVID, when no fans had been in the stadiums for a year, was still one of the most lucrative, and therefore it's not that this isn't affordable to clubs. They can certainly make that contribution. But I think if you get it straight into the grassroots of football, you grow the game, you produce more homegrown talent, and hopefully one day that Premier League contribution could actually lead to a young player playing in the Premier League.
You've no doubt seen the statement from the Premier League following the announcements yesterday. They fully support what you're trying to do, but ultimately they don't want to take money away from their league. What did you make of what they had to say?
Well, I wasn't really surprised. I mean, the Premier League is currently the regulator for the Premier League, and my report is recommending that there is an independent regulator. So it's not a surprise that the Premier League themselves don't automatically welcome this report. But I have to say, we've spoken to clubs across the pyramid, including Premier League clubs, who support the idea of an independent regulator, certainly don't see it as a threat to the growth of the Premier League or any other parts of English football. I think the Premier League is exceptionally good at promoting the Premier League as a competition. We've seen an increase in broadcasting revenue from around the world. We see the development of youth. We see investment in all parts of the pyramid. They're really, really good at that. And all I'm doing is taking away some of the bits that they're not so good at, giving it to an independent regulator to do it better and allow them to continue to focus on the bits that they're excellent at.
Let's talk about the fans, shall we, Tracy? Arguably the most important stakeholder in football. You've proposed a golden share for supporters and a shadow board at clubs. And we know from their opposition to the European Super League how much of a voice they can have in football. But in terms of actually implementing that, how important is it for supporters to be involved in decision-making at clubs?
Oh, it's absolutely essential, and we took hundreds of hours of evidence from fans throughout the pyramid and beyond, and I think it's very clear that they felt that over the past decade or so that they've been left out of the process, and that many clubs have made really bad decisions because they haven't engaged or consulted with their clubs. I need to be clear and say that there are some clubs out there that are absolutely excellent engaging with their fans, and that they can completely take them along with the decisions of the clubs, and you can see that they've thrived as a consequence of that. So again, I don't think club management need to worry about having the fans involved in some of the key decisions for a club. In fact, they should embrace it and make sure that the decisions that they're being made are with the fans absolutely the heart of that. And I really genuinely believe that we'll see a better regulated, more successful, thriving English football scene.
The report, Tracy, also expresses the concern about the amount of money leaving the game to agents, but it didn't go as far as to make recommendations for tightening the regulations. Why not?
Well, one of the reasons for that is we don't want to put English football at a disadvantage in any shape or form, actually, to other growing leagues across the world. And this is a global problem. This is not a problem that is unique to Premier League clubs. It might be, have more of an acute impact in Premier League clubs because we're the wealthiest league in the world. But, many clubs raised the issue of agents with us. It would have been remiss not to have put it into the report. But FIFA are looking at the regulation of agents, and I think it needs to be part of that broader package rather than completely separate to it.
What about player welfare, Tracy? You said that it's got to be looked at as a matter of high priority. What exactly are your concerns when it comes to player welfare?
Well, it was really interesting, the number of fans who raised player welfare with us. It wasn't something that was necessarily part of the guiding principles of the review initially. But, fans care about their clubs and they care about their players for those clubs, both the future, present and past players. And what is clear is that in many aspects, some of that welfare is not being considered as best as it could be. So we recommend a comprehensive welfare system, particularly for players who are exiting the game. But I think it's something that should be done quite urgently. We've seen some really tragic stories of players who either haven't made it at a very young age, and that impacts quite significantly on their mental health, or players in the past who unfortunately, have suffered, tragic outcomes because of, not being supported. And I think it's just something that fans really care about.
OK, Tracy, we're going to leave it there, but really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed.